So to log into your zip forms, which is where you're going to find your purchase agreement, you go to car.org, car.org, car.org. Once you get to car.org, you'll be like, Amy, that doesn't look like zip forms. In fact, there's not even anything that says zip forms. I know it's so confusing. I'm sorry I didn't design this system. It used to be so much easier, but it used to have a little button right here that said zip forms. But now it says Realtor Secure Transaction. So that's where you need to go right there. The little bubble, top bubble in the middle of the screen. And then that'll get you to this. You can also go from that screen if you forget what bubble to push. If you come up here to Transaction Center, maybe. From here, you can go to, it's still so super confusing from here. It's Realtor Secure Transactions. There's no easy way. And then from this window, your goal is this window. If you were gonna like save a bookmark, save this window, not the previous one. Okay. And you don't have to be signed in at this point. It'll prompt you to sign in a minute if you're not signed in. So you can bookmark this page and it'll take you here without being signed in. Okay. From here, you're gonna go to this one with the little wolf that says Access Zip Forms because it's Lone Wolf Transaction Zip Form Editions. So you're going to click Access Zip Forms. Oh, sorry. Wow.
Amy, what's the difference between that one and the one all the way to the right? The other one all the way to the right is the one I used last time. The Realtors Secure Transaction. When would you use that one all the way to the right? Secure Transactions.
This is just tips and stuff.
Okay. Okay.
It won't actually take you anywhere that you can get to the form.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
It's just to give you tips. Okay. All right. So then if you're not signed in, it's going to prompt you to sign in. This is your car login. Anytime you want to link your zip form to anything else, you have to use your car.org login credentials. So that'll always be an option. So if you're trying to link zip forms to Glide, or I don't even think it links to Glide anymore, or HomeLight listing management, or anything that it tries to link and sync up with zip form, there's always a selection. Use your car login, and that's what you want to select. Okay, you can't just go zip form login and plug in that credentials and it'll get you in. It won't. You'll just keep getting an error message and get frustrated and you'll be like, Amy lied, and then now I've told you the truth. Okay. From here, you're going to click, once you're logged in, you're going to click continue to transactions, the yellow button in the middle of the screen, which is going to open up a new window. If you have your pop-up blocker on, that's going to cause a problem. So just be a heads up on that one. So if you're like, I'm clicking on it and it's not going anywhere, if you've got pop-up blocker, that's why. So turn it off. Renewal. This one, it always causes problems. Once a year, it'll ask you to renew your zip forms library. See, it's right here. It's $0, right? And we just hit complete order. Email, counting, I don't know. It's, how do you want? Oh, there we go. Okay. Said something about county. Maybe it's further down. Let's just keep, let's keep scrolling. Oh, that'd be fun. All right. So if you get an error message, it's because you didn't scroll. You're going to click the little button, edit form information, because who would have known in complete order. I did my SPQ this morning. I didn't do a good job scrolling on that one either. Right. All right. So there, see, now it completed that. So if, when you get this update, that's what you have to do to stop getting the update. And then hit access transactions. It blocks my pop-up. Throw you guys on the bottom. Let's try again.
Sorry, how's it?
Watching you. Okay. All right. All right. So here is your forms. I usually create new documents. Like if I've got a buyer, it's going to be like the last name and purchase, or last name and offer, something like that, versus my listings I usually name with an address. So if I was going to create a new one, I would say new, right? You have new listing, new purchase, right? So we're covering buyer, the purchase agreement. So you'd click new purchase or offer. Here's where you'd enter the name. So I'd be like Petard Test Purchase. I can't spell, it's all right though. It's not that I can't spell, I can't type. My fingers don't move as fast as my brain. Okay. From here, you could click residential, which would loop it in. And I'm just going to skip this next section real quick. I'll show you how to do that here in a minute, because you can do it from this screen or the other one. But because I have a template set up, it's automatically going to plug in my template information here. So there's a training on that in the spreadsheet if you want to learn how to do templates, and we can always cover that again coming up here soon. And then we'll hit save. Templates are magic. All right, so it's applying my template and then it opens. Once you hit save, if you're patient, take some deep breaths, it'll open up that transaction for you. I don't put anything in here in this area. Okay, this is not where I track my transactions. I really just use this for the forms. So the only thing I put in here is I go into parties, and this is where I'd put in my buyer information. And I really only care about my buyer's legal name, like it looks like on the lender pre-qualification letter or pre-approval letter or underwriting approval, and their email. Okay, how you enter the name is how it's going to appear on the contract. So you want it to be their legal name. So at some point you should verify with your buyers what their legal names are, because some people go by random nicknames, right? Like don't tell her I told you this, but Taylor Fetters, who does my NHD, her name is not Taylor.
Oh yeah, she told us that one.
It's Megan.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Her middle name's not even Taylor. All right, yes.
When you do this, you obviously ask them and you match it what's on the purchase agreement. What if it's the purchase agreement and the loan? What if it's different than what's on the license? Does that matter?
As long as they like say somebody recently got married and their license isn't updated yet, but they've got a marriage certificate showing that they were married and they want to put their married name, that's okay. You're just going to have a document trail to prove it. I had a seller one time that had he was listed on title under a AKA, also known as.
Oh boy.
So he bought his property that way, which was really hard. He had to like go back and find his old driver's license that showed him with that name so that he could prove to the notary he was, it was a mess. Anyways, so you're not super concerned about, the lender should know what their legal name is on their social security information, right? Their social security number, what pulls up there. That's usually what the lender goes. Sometimes the lender will even put their nickname on the pre-approval letter and not their legal name. So just, I always double check with my clients that that is their legal name. Yeah. If it's different, if their legal name is different than what's on their license for whatever reason, you just want to make sure that they've got something to prove who they are. Otherwise, put the name on the license.
Got it. Okay.
Or let them
about that.
What?
What you're filling out right now. Does that transfer over to the RPA when you start it?
It does.
I haven't done it. Okay, I haven't done it that way. I've only done like a cover sheet where then that transfers everything. So just wondering. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Come in here, put it in here. So we're using Anastasia today, and Anastasia's email is going to be this one. Oh, that put in way more information than I wanted. All right.
Here.
Anyways, so you don't have to put, I don't worry about their street address. I don't worry about their phone number. I don't worry about anything except their legal name and their email, only because if their email's in here, it makes it easier to send things out for electronic signatures. Okay. It pulls it. You don't have to type it in every time. And then we hit save. Right? If you have multiple buyers, you could add buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3, buyer 4, all that in there. Okay. Then we go to documents. I don't use the cover sheet often, especially now that the RPA is so easy to fill out. Number one is new agents. With the old RPA, I didn't recommend using the cover sheet because then you never learn where it is in the RPA, and it's better to learn where it's located. That's how you get to know the forms, is by finding where to fill everything out. And number two, with the new one, because it's the grid system, it's super easy just to go through the grid. the cover sheet, not my favorite, but lots of people use it and your mentor will probably teach you to use it and that's totally fine. So once you add people, now we're going to make an offer. So this file I use for every offer I'm going to write for this buyer until we get an offer accepted. I don't write an offer, it doesn't get accepted. I trash this one and create a new file. I just keep overwriting this information. The only time I would do something different than that is if my buyer were submitting 2 offers at the same time. Then I would come from this homepage. Where did it go?
Yes, so many.
I have to go. It's thinking really. Oh, there it goes. Nope, that's not it. Why didn't it save it? Evil. All right, that's right. We'll come back to that here in a second. We're just going to hop to a different screen. When in doubt, hop to a new screen and go back. There it is. Okay, so
Magic.
it's magic. You know, like they tell you, like, hey, if your phone stops working, turn it off. Something stops working on this, just go to another tab and come back. It's magic. All right. So if we were going to write 2 offers at the same time, submit on 2 different properties, what I do is I hit this little down arrow right here after I wrote one, and I would hit copy, which is going to create a whole copy of that Petard Purchase 2 or whatever. And then on this one, I may put the street name, who knows, and then hit save. And then it's going to duplicate that so that if one gets accepted and it's got the other address on it, I've got both working with the active properties on them. Okay. So then I would have Petard Purchase and Petard Test Purchase 2. And then I could drop both offers without getting really confused and screwing it up. Don't screw it up and send the wrong offer to the wrong agent. All right. There we go. So we're back here. So now we go to documents. From here, if we know what property we're going to write an offer on, which we should, right? Because we're writing an offer, to make it really easy on yourself, you can hit MLS Connect. It's the second little button up here on the toolbar. It'll ask you to plug in your Barry's information if you haven't done that before. This is your Barry's login and password. And then you can plug in the listing ID here. I have no idea what this one is. We're just gonna pick that one because it was there before. We'll see if it pulls it. Click include property photo and hit find. Yeah, that's what I thought. Let's try another one. It's a fun game. If not, I'll open up and find the listing ID. I think it's going to get it. Ta-da! All right, there we go. So now this only works for Barry's. If you don't, we don't have a separate login. So if you try to pull a property from Metro, like in the service area of Metro, it won't actually pull it, just so you know. So if you're in the Sacramento area, you're out of luck. But you know, Barry's covers your Solano, Sonoma, Napa, Marin counties. Okay.
That map is all over.
So here's this. You're verified that yes, that's the right property. It's the right address. It's the right little cute little house. And then you hit save. What it's going to do, we're going to hit yes. So it's going to ask if you want to override the data. You want to hit yes, especially if you've already written an offer, because this is going to take that new property's information and wipe out all the old property information like magic. Okay. It's also going to pull in all of the other agent's information and make it really easy for you to complete your purchase without having to fill everything in. So mine's got a template, so it's already got my information in here. It's pulling this from what I put in contacts, and we just want to make sure the buttons are pushed.
Oh, but you added a template, so that's why those documents were already in your file. Otherwise, we need to go over
Oh,
there,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Sorry, that's a good point, Heather. Good point. All right. So over here, where it says all forms on the right-hand side of the page, this is where you would find it, and you can search for forms with like either the acronym RPA, or you could go like, I don't know what it's called. It's a purchase agreement, RCHASE, right? I am missing an R. Right. So residential purchase agreement, right? So that's what you're looking. So you can do it either way. Once it's blue, it's in your file. Okay. So if it's highlighted blue, you've already added it, and you would just double click on it. It would magically highlight blue, and then just click on this other screen. That one magically goes away, and then you're back here. Okay. We're not going to spend a lot of time on these other forms at the beginning of the document because we're going to cover those next week.
Can you scroll down where you inputted the info from right now when you did the berry search? So that basically inputted like the APN, the seller's information on there. Like what information was that it pulled?
So right here. So we hadn't gotten to that yet. So right here
Okay.
on the purchase agreement, you'll see that the property address, the city, the county, the zip code, the APN is already here in the purchase because I imported it from the MLS. Also, the listing broker and agents information and their license numbers are all in here as well.
Oh, that's great. I've been copying and pasting like after I pull out the APN number.
Yeah. All right. So we can just import it. You'll want to make sure that you double click the date at the top page for the date prepared. It'll magically input today's date. Magic is my favorite word today, just so everybody knows, so you don't have to wonder, because I know Milo's going to say something.
I love the word.
Magic is the word of the day. It's going to take me magic to get through today. So double click and it'll put in today's date. You can also, if you single click, it'll pull up a calendar you can click on, but now like in 2 clicks, I could have had it there already. Okay. You want to make sure these boxes get checked, right? So this is what we call the grid now. It's the first 3 pages of the purchase agreement. This is where all the details are going to get put for your contract. The rest of it's just definitions now. So much easier to fill it out, so much easier to find things, so much easier not screw things up. Okay. So this is just confirming the confirmation of agency, right? So we always confirm with our buyers, that's the address, right? And then how they're being represented, that Joe Brazil is representing the seller and I'm representing you as the buyer. If it was both KW Vaca Valley, let's say Melissa was the listing agent and I was the buyer's agent, but we were both KW Vaca Valley, it would be both the buyer and the seller as dual agency. Okay. These boxes should be able to be separated, but they can't. So, and it won't let you go back now. All right, there we go. The seller and the seller's agent. It hates me. That's all right. There we go. All right. So that's just so you guys understand that it doesn't have to be you representing both parties as long as the brokerage is its dual agency. Okay. Then we come down here to the grid. Here's where you would plug in the purchase price, right? And this is, we're just going to go through terms of the contract. If it was all cash, you'd check a button, how many days for the close of escrow. You can do a specific day or a string of days, right? A period of time, 30 days. When the offer expires, it always defaults to 3 calendar days at 5 p.m. Initial deposit amount. Remember, we always want to have a conversation with our buyer about this initial deposit amount. Typical for the area is no less than 1% of the purchase price. So if it's a $500,000, that's a $5 million purchase price. If it was a $500,000 purchase price, it would be $5,000, and it little computes it out there for you. You can increase that to make your offer more solid and more sound and more amazing. But keep in mind that there's no point in going over 3%. Bless you, because the liquidated damages clauses limits what the seller can go after you for to 3% anyways. And so it's just fluff after 3%. This is how they're going to make that deposit amount. It defaults to wire transfer. So always have a conversation with your buyer. How do you want to take a check to the title company? Do you want to use their electronic check system? Do you want to wire the funds? I always check the box and put buyer to choose, right? That way I don't care how the buyer gets it there, as long as they get it there, and I don't have to do an AEA, an amendment to the existing agreement, if it says wire transfer and they dropped off a check. Let's not create extra paperwork for ourselves.
Which box is that? I'm sorry.
This one right here, where it says buyer to choose.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yep, D1. Increased deposit. If your buyer was going to do an increased deposit, like at removal of contingencies, or once their property entered into the contract to sell, if they had a property to sell, you could do an increased deposit there. Loan amounts. This is where you're going to fill in your loan amounts. So we want to make sure that's accurate with what's on their pre-approval letter and what their down payment's going to be. So if they are going with 10% down, then our loan amount would be $450,000. And it's going to confirm for you now that that's 10% down, right? 90% of the purchase price. Defaults to fixed rate and not to exceed. I usually put in an interest rate here, something a little higher than what their lender thinks they're going to be at, but not super high, because that gives you the ability to cancel, right? So as we're explaining this to our buyers, if their lender thinks they're going to be like in the 3.5, 3.875 range, then I usually like round it up just a little bit to 4% and just let them know that, hey, if something happened, even if you qualified for the loan, but the interest rates jumped to like 6% overnight, which they could, right? We could cancel this contract based on the loan contingency because the rate exceeds 4%.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I should have interrupted you because you always tell me to, but I didn't. For the initial deposit amount, like, give me an instance where that would kind of benefit the buyer, because I don't really see a big benefit to that.
All right. So it doesn't benefit the buyer except in getting your offer accepted, because it shows that the buyer has funds available.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But even though they're putting a down payment?
Even though they're putting a down payment, they're just willing to put more skin in the game. It's really hard to keep a buyer's deposit. Like they really have to screw up to keep a buyer's deposit. But sellers feel like, oh, well, that one's got a $10,000 deposit and the other one only has a $5,000 deposit. So they must be really serious. It's truly, it's all fluff. Is really what it comes down to. Okay. It's all fluff.
Right. Because you have the EMD and then, I meant increased deposit.
Oh.
So yeah, you have your EMD, which is your deposit. So what would be the significance for the increased deposit? I'm sorry.
All right. So significance on increased deposit. So let's say our initial deposit's 1% at $5,000, but we are going to do an increased deposit of an increase of $10,000, which is 2% of the purchase price, for a total of 3% upon removal of contingencies. So once my buyer removes all those contingencies, we're going to put in more money into escrow the sellers could keep if we cancel.
Oh, that's the that's it right
So
there.
later after contingency.
After, this one probably works.
Okay. And so if somebody had less, like if somebody only put like less than 1%, then you would kind of think like, are they really serious? Like, are they doing like a multiple offer situation? You know, because they're not putting as much in.
Yeah. So if a buyer puts less than 1% down, it questions their
seriousness
to close on that house. Right. And like a VA buyer, they're going to finance 100%. So making a bigger deposit up front that's going to go towards their closing costs or get refunded back to them. Like it just shows that, hey, even though I'm a VA buyer, I still have funds. Right. So building that case, especially for somebody with a low down payment.
I wish I'd have known that too. I know that hindsight 2020 is just like
better bait for the fish.
So even with the increased deposit, still like it doesn't matter to go over 3% because with the liquidated damages, they can only go after up to 3% anyway, right?
Yeah, if everybody's agreed to the liquidated damages clause, then they're limited to 3%. Anyway.
Okay, thanks.
So you could put, $50,000 in that increased deposit, and then, initial the liquidated damages.
More jeopardy.
The seller's only going to be able to go after that 3%.
Oh.
All right, loan amounts, we talked about that. Mark, what kind of loan, right? We want to verify what kind of loan. I said we weren't going to go through this, how to fill it out, but how do you not? How do you not? Because you got to explain this to the buyers, right?
Exactly.
So conventional, right? If don't check anything, it's conventional. Otherwise it'd be FHA or VA. If you're asking for seller financing or other, maybe you're doing, I don't know, borrowed money or something, or all the funds are coming. I don't, it'd be a loan amount. So I don't know. So anyways, most of it's going to be FHA, VA, or conventional.
Amy?
Yep, you'll get that from the lender. Yes.
It's not a question, but can you explain to us more about the seller financing?
Yeah. So most houses are not going to do seller financing in this day and age. It's a seller's market. So it's out of control. Sellers aren't going to finance, but you will find seller financing on like vacant lots and things like that, where it's more often you'll see seller financing come into play. With seller financing, it allows, or even on some of like your bigger purchase price properties, you might get the seller to finance a portion of your down payment. So let's say like Sam had one of these where the buyers had 10% down, but then the lender changed it, or maybe they had 20 and the lender changed it to be 30% down. They didn't have that additional 10%. So the seller financed the additional 10% down payment. So the first lender did 70%, the seller did 10%, and then the buyer came in with 20%. And seller financing usually is going to have a little higher interest rate than your current market rates, especially because it's a second, and it's usually going to be on a shorter term. Oftentimes it's going to be like an interest only payment, or it'll be amortized over 30 years, which means your payments are spread over 30 years, but it's due in 5. Right? So it's like a balloon payment. You start making payments, you're making only interest only payments for 5 years. And then you've got to figure out how to get out of that seller financing. So you got to refinance or pay it off or do whatever.
And I'm sorry, just so the seller themselves went to their own lender to take out money for these people to get the house.
No,
Okay.
no.
Wait a minute.
So the seller
I'm
is
tracking right
getting,
now.
the seller's getting enough money out of the proceeds that they're just going to take $50,000
Less 10%.
Got it, okay.
But
Right.
it's not a credit.
It's not a credit, it's
Because
financing.
You're
It's going to be,
loaning them the money.
it's
they
gonna
gotta
get
pay
paid
back.
Got
Gotcha.
it, got
Yeah.
it, okay.
so it doesn't work if we're doing a purchase price of 500,000 and the seller owes 578,000 or 478,000. You're not going to get seller financing on that property because they've got to pay off the loan of the property, right? So it's usually, that's why you see it more in land, because you don't have big loans oftentimes on land, or in those bigger purchase prices, you'll see it on occasion. Because most of the time they don't owe $2 million on the property. They owe 400,000. And so they've got, they can wiggle a little bit with it, and they're making interest on their money. So usually they're like, hey, we're an investor. We know we can foreclose on this property and get it back. And I can make interest on this money at 6, 7, 8, 9% for the next couple of years, which is more than I'm going to make in my bank.
And then that's all legally recorded with title. So it has, now do they do it? No, hold on.
No.
They'll get a promissory note and it gets recorded as a lien against the property.
Yeah, that might go everybody.
Yeah.
Next
Sorry,
one.
you see that question Melissa just asked? She's not awake.
Thank you, Amy. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
I had a magic question.
Now I need to know. What's your question?
I was.
I can just say I'll answer it later.
Let's do it.
I'll answer it at 8 o'clock tonight.
I'm
Right, I
good.
better put that in the group me and y'all tell me tomorrow. I was just gonna ask about, because like if you do, somebody does a loan against your home but through escrow, they open up a different escrow. Would it be a different escrow number or would it be tied to this?
No, it's same one,
Oh,
same
okay.
escrow.
Okay.
Just like if you
All
were
right,
doing
that
a first
wasn't
and a
bad.
second loan,
Okay,
same escrow number, same escrow. It
Okay.
all operates. The escrow officer usually even draws up the promissory note.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, super simple.
Okay.
All right. If it's VA or FHA here, you can deliver a list of lender required repairs. It defaults to 17 days. This is the little hidden contingency in there, right? I usually make this match the appraisal contingency. And the reason I make it match the appraisal contingency is because lender required repairs are going to come from the appraiser in 99% of the cases. Okay, outside of the pest inspection, which now most of the time we just need the Form 33. So I want it to match up with that appraisal contingency and when we think we're going to get that back and when we can remove that, because that's where those lender required repairs come into play. And then they used to have a separate form for those type of repairs, but now you just do it on the regular repair request, but there's a box for lender required repairs. Okay. Additional financed amounts. So, right, we have the loan here. This would be like for your first loan, if you had a first and a second. So maybe we had a first at $450,000 and then we had a $25,000 second that was seller financing. That's what we could check that box there for the second. And then it added the seller financing addendum. Maybe we were doing like a CalHAFA program where we had down payment assistance in the amount of like 3% or whatever, then you could plug in 15,000 there for the down payment assistance, fixed rate not to exceed, right? And you could say it's conventional seller financing other. This is where you might want to put Cal JFA.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What if you have a buyer and they get like down payment assistance kind of a thing, but it's not the FHA or anything like that? It's just kind of, I don't know how it worked. It's like a loan to help pay for the closing costs and the down payment. Would you put anything in there for that?
Yeah, so as long as it's a loan, I would put it here in the additional financed amount, whatever that is. And most of the programs, any sort of the city assistance programs or the CalHAFA, or there's a new one out that I can't think of what it's called. Most of them have a name. So find out from the lender if it has a name, or just put down payment assistance program here, down payment, right?
So like I have one that's like the GSFA, and but that one they don't have to pay back. So would that be like a place to put that one in also, even though it is an additional finance because it's the down payment that they're going to pay off? Or at the grant, it's a grant, it's free money.
It's grant, it's not free. Number one, just for everybody's record, it's not free. It's an increased rate on the first loan for the grant money. So you're paying it, you just don't notice it. And yeah,
free.
So
how does that happen? Okay, I gotta talk to my lender because they're like, no, they don't have to pay back. It's a grant.
Well, they don't technically pay it back. So what happens is the first loan that it pairs with, instead of being at 3.5%, it's going to be at like 4.5%. And then it pairs with that grant money. So it's a little higher interest rate because there's higher risk associated with it because there's more finance. And then if they sell it within a certain period of time, they do have to pay off that loan. It's just if they hold that property long enough, then it gets forgiven. They don't have to pay it with the grant. But it's a grant and it's something. So here's how you want to think about it, right? If the buyer didn't qualify for that grant for some reason, would they be able to purchase the home? And the answer is probably no. So we want it to be contingent on that additional financed amount, even though they don't have to pay it back. Okay, so this is setting up our loan contingency here. Okay, if they were getting a first, a second, and third, like some of those programs have, like you do an FHA first, you do the CalHAFA second, and then you do the GSFA third so you get down payment and closing cost assistance. Then we would put that down here in additional finance terms. You would put additional financing for down, closing cost assistance in the amount of X. So it's all on there. We want it all on there. So if something happened and it fell through, they canceled the program, it went belly up, whatever happened, that we could cancel, okay, and get their deposit back.
That's additional loan or finance?
Additional financing terms. Okay. Occupancy here, we would put primary is the default. If it was going to be a secondary home, right, a vacation property or an investment, they're going to use it. And this doesn't necessarily matter to a seller. For the most part, sellers don't generally care, but the lender might care. So if they're purchasing it as a second home with second home financing, we probably should check the box secondary. Or if they're using investment financing, right, rental income purchase loans and stuff, then we want it to say investment. Otherwise we leave it primary. Okay. These auto calculate for you. That's the end of the grid on page 1. Melissa has a question.
So, okay, so you said that if there was like 3 different financings, you put it in the notes down here. Do they need to be like in order? Like, so let's say this is 15, but this one was 20. Like, does that one need to be there versus, you know what I mean?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So I would put them in order of how they're, like you've got your, it's usually when you've got more than 2 financing types, it's usually you've got your primary loan, and then you've got down payment assistance and then closing cost assistance. I usually put them in that order, right? Because your down payment is the most important to get the purchase price, and then what else they're getting for the closing cost would be like the third option, in my opinion. That's just how my brain thinks about it, but it really makes no difference.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Just on that same kind of note, does it matter where they get their earnest money deposit from? Does that need to be documented somewhere there also?
No, where they're getting their earnest money deposit from doesn't matter necessarily to a seller as long as they show proof of funds. It's going to matter to the lender. So we don't need to put it on the contract, but the lender needs to know where that earnest money is coming from to make sure they've got to track it and everything and make sure it's okay.
If they're pulling from a retirement.
Yes. Or if they're like pulling it out from underneath their mattress, the lender needs to know that ahead of time because it's probably not okay. You're going to have to wait a couple months to do your purchase. Tell them to go put their money in the bank. No mattress money. Or get a loan, get a gift from a friend and pay the friend back the money. So at least then there's a paper trail of the money. But they can't deposit the money. The friend's going to have to show that they had that money in their account, not the mattress money. So here you go. Okay. All right. G1 is seller credit. So if we're asking for a seller credit to the buyer at the initial, that would be like, usually when it comes up on a purchase contract, you're going to see it as like a closing cost credit, right? They need help with closing costs. You're going to ask for it. You don't see that very often anymore. But if the market pushes and turns at some point, it will. I promise it's cyclical. That's what the market conditions advisory tells us. It's cyclical. It will move back at some point to a buyer's market at some point. Here's where you check that box, fill in the amount, and then seller credit to be applied to closing costs or other. So whatever other would enter into. Then you got that additional financing terms that we talked about, like that's where you put the third or anything that financing is contingent upon. Okay. Verification of cash funds. This is, hey, buyer, you know, we're going to need to show the seller that you actually have the funds available for that down payment and closing costs. So it's usually about 2% of the purchase price for closing costs. So if it's $500,000 and they're putting 50,000 down, we want to show that they've got like somewhere around 70,000 in the bank, right? Really, it's going to be closer to like 60 you could get away with to show that they have those funds available. Now, if you're going to do an appraisal gap, right, where you're guaranteeing money above the appraised value, then we want to make sure you can show those funds as well. Okay. And I usually, it defaults with the offer. You can check it to 3 days or 1 day after, but it's better to submit it with your offer, especially in this market, to show that your buyer's legit.
I'm sorry, did you say verification?
Yeah, verification of all cash.
So,
oh, sorry, I skipped this one and went down the verification of down payment and closing costs.
But is that just as far just giving a bank statement?
Yes.
Or what is that? And then blocking out their personal information?
Yeah. So
okay.
Either way, verification of cash is the first one. If it was an all cash offer, second is down payment and closing costs, and you would just want to see that full, like the bank statement or retirement account or estimated net sheet if they're selling a property that shows that that fund's coming from that property.
Oh, okay.
And you can blank out their account numbers. Okay, their name should be on there, but their account number doesn't need to be. Okay. Verification of loan application. This is going to be that letter that we get from the lender, right? Either our pre-qualification or pre-approval or fully underwritten approval. For the most part, we want pre-approval or fully underwritten pre-approval. Okay, that means the lenders actually review their documents and pull their credit history and actually feel like they can complete the purchase, not just gone off whatever Mila told me yesterday. Okay. When you come to the office, you get picked on. Sorry. It's Anastasia's name on the contract.
Just write me on your favorite.
Hold on.
All right.
Even though Heather's trying to be.
I know.
Next year we're teaching a class.
With all her notes.
All right. Final verification of property. That's her problem. Final verification of property condition. You can put a range there. So it defaults to 5 days prior to close of escrow. That's when we're going to do our final walkthrough and make sure that the property is in the same condition on the day that we close as it was on the day that we got the offer accepted, because that's how the property should be. And so you can put a range in there. So instead of being 5 days prior to close, we could bump it closer to 1 to 5 days.
So would that be when the loan officer, what's that final
the
clear
CD.
to close? Yeah, the CD.
Yeah. So you could do it. So the CD is normally issued about 5 days prior to close of escrow. Right. The CD gets issued, then we have to wait 3 days.
Right. Okay. That's what I was meaning.
And then we sit around and twiddle our thumbs for 3 days. You could do the final verification there. It's just to make sure that the property's in the same condition, that any repairs were completed. So it's probably a good idea to do it like 2 days prior to close or a little sooner, somewhere in that range. And then we always want to, if you were to go deliver keys, right? We closed escrow, now we're delivering keys and there's something wrong with the property. We want to message the agent right then and there and get on the phone with them and be like, hey, there's an issue. Not like 3 days later, come back and go, oh, well, your seller's left all sorts of trash and here's the bill for that. Because then they're going to fight it versus, hey, I just showed up to deliver keys and there's trash everywhere. How do you want to handle this, right?
So question, okay,
yes.
So let's say I go to an open house on a Sunday and my agent, we got it in, and Tuesday they look and the offer's accepted. So you're saying it's supposed to be when the offer's accepted. Do you then go see the property? What if in those 2 days something happened to the house? Technically, there's holes when your offers.
That is why you should do your agent visual inspection disclosure as close to accepted contract as possible. So offer gets accepted on Tuesday. Ideally, you'd be at that house on Tuesday doing the visual inspection.
Got it. So, okay, that would help.
Yeah,
okay,
Tuesday or Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Here's your loan. Here's the rest of our contingencies, right? We're talking to our buyer. We're walking them through this. The rest of our contingencies, these are the things that protect our deposit. So, right. So my job is your deposit protector. We're either going to close on this house or you're going to get your deposit back. That's my goal. Okay. So our loan, all those things that we talked about up in the financing section, the loan amount, 2 loans, the interest rate, all of that's protected by this loan contingency. Okay. If there was no loan contingency, maybe you're fully underwritten. It's multiple offers. You know, there's going to be 27 offers on this property. You're fully underwritten. You could go in with no loan contingency. Okay. Then your buyer's stuck like Chuck. Okay. They could still cancel based on the loan contingency. They're not going to get their deposit back. Okay. If we hit this button here. Just stressing around. All right. Appraisal contingency. The appraisal contingency is going to protect us that the property is going to appraise at what we're offering on the property, or we're going to be able to try to renegotiate the contract based on that appraised value, or we can cancel the contract and get your deposit back. The reason it's important that the property appraises is, number one, you want to make sure that you feel confident with the value of the property you're buying. And number two, the lender is either going to loan the money based on the appraised value or the contract price, whichever is lower. So if we appraise, if we make an offer at 500,000 and it only comes in at 490,000, the lender is going to only loan you money based on 490,000. If we have no appraisal contingency, you would be responsible to come in with cash for that additional 10,000. This is a good place to talk with them about an appraisal gap in a multiple offer situation, that some buyers are coming in with a predetermined amount that they'd be willing to go above appraised value in order to solidify their offer, right? No appraisal contingency, right?
So is that where you would put in, like, if you're like, I will do 10,000 over, I would check that box and put 10,000
so
over appraised?
So if we were going to go 10,000 over appraised, then we could come in and say, hey, we're willing to go with a appraised value of 490,000 or higher. Right? That covers that gap. There's also down here in the other terms, that would be a good place to put it down here in section R. This would be where you would say if appraisal comes in below contract price, buyer and seller agree that sales price to 10,000 over appraised value, not to exceed contract price, original contract price. Right, so that would be the other place that you could put in the gap, where this is, hey, it doesn't matter if it appraises at 475, at 490, at 500, we're willing to come to 10,000 over that up to 5,000. And the buyer and seller both agree that that's going to be the final sales price. There's no bottom to it, where this one gives you a bottom.
So even though, like, okay, let's say that scenario, let's really shouldn't have it, but what if it was like appraised for 450? So you now put 490, so now you're going to go 40 over.
So if we put 490 here and it came in at 450, then we would have the right to cancel, or we could work to renegotiate it down to that appraised value. But nobody's solidified that, so you are working, and the sellers could cancel and be like, no, it's 490 or nothing.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Would it only be wise to remove an appraisal contingency if, like, they were coming in with all cash, or as long as it's financed, it should be in place? Yeah.
So you could come in with all cash, or if you had this down here where we're pre-agreeing to the sales price, right? That it's going to be whatever that appraised value is, we're going to be 10,000 over, not to exceed the contract price. You could realistically, and you ultimately should then remove that appraisal contingency.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because otherwise what we've agreed to is our appraisal contingency is based on the contract price. Even though we've agreed to this, if that appraisal contingency is still in place, ultimately, if it didn't appraise at 500,000, we could cancel. The buyers could, sellers could, but buyers could. Okay. The other thing that comes into play here is if they're a VA or FHA buyer, they have a VA FHA amendatory clause that states that they The removal of the contingency does not eliminate the cancellation rights underneath that. So that supersedes this. So even if I removed my appraisal contingency, if I still had the FHA VA amendatory clause in place, my FHA or VA buyer could still cancel, even though there's no appraisal contingency. Okay.
Can I just double check what you said about the check mark that you just had on the appraisal that you clicked on at 490? And then did you say that for the example, did you say should it like purchase price was 490, not to, you have a contingency of like 10,000 in place, not to exceed 490? Is that what you said?
Yes.
That the offer is 490, but if it comes lower, like at 470, then you're only paying 10,000 over 470, so, not to exceed 490. Is that what you said?
Yes. So
okay.
at this box, what this box is telling us is, hey, we came in at 500,000 and we're willing to move forward as long as it appraises at 490,000 or higher. If we put in
because they have 10,000 extra.
Yeah. So that's assumed 10,000
okay.
extra. Now it doesn't talk about what then happens if it appraises at 480 or 470 or 460. It only talks about like from 490 to 500, we're good. Okay. If you put the appraisal gap in there, then that describes what happens if it comes in below that number or below the contract price. So you could do one or the other. I wouldn't necessarily do both.
Okay, because on mine, I didn't click that. Mine was, I just wrote the verbiage on there, like client to pay 10,000, 15,000 over appraised value not to exceed 500,000 type of thing. So that could be at any amount that it appraises at. We're just paying 15 over.
Yep.
Okay.
And you need that other box checked up top.
You do what?
You wouldn't need this box checked up top if
you wouldn't check the box. Okay, perfect.
So I'm sorry, you're only clicking that box if you don't want it to go any, or not any lower. No, if it goes lower, then you can negotiate.
It allows
you.
It doesn't matter. So what Montiel's saying is, no matter what, 450, they'll go 10, so they'll go 460. Yeah. Okay, got it. Okay. Yeah. Make sure. Click, not click.
Not click. Investigation of property. This is your physical investigation of the property. So that's how many days you have to conduct inspections and go walk the property and make a decision whether you want to purchase it or not. This is the informational access to the property. Even if we had no inspection contingency, we'd still access the property. I usually put this somewhere around 25 to 30 days on a 30-day close of escrow. If I have my 5-day verification of property condition in those last 5 days, then I might be like, hey, we've got access for 25 days. That just means after this date, if the seller doesn't want to allow you in the property to take measurements or look at something or look at the flooring again or do whatever, they don't have to.
Oh, gotcha.
They can, most still will, but they don't have to. Okay, if this is in here, they are legally obligated to allow you to see the property.
Question about the investigation of property. That's the time that you have to do the your inspections, right?
Yep, physical investigation of property.
So like right now, there's a lot of the sellers are coming in with all of the what are those things called? The inspections.
Yeah.
So if they're already disclosing all those and you have that access in hand already, like what would you reduce that to? And does it depend on, it probably does depend on like how severe the inspections are, right? Because you might want to hire somebody else again to go and do another inspection.
Yeah, so you may want to have additional inspections done. You could shorten it to little, if the inspection's already done, you may be like, hey, we don't need any further investigation of the property, so we're going to remove that contingency or that part of the contingency. Or you may shorten it to like 3 days or 5 days just so you can walk back through the property. If you're going to have any additional inspections done, I usually don't recommend shortening it less than like 7 because it's really hard to get inspectors in there.
Yeah, and now that it's getting busier, like 7-10 days or so, just in case. Yeah. Like I think Shannon posted on Facebook yesterday, I think like she needs like a pool or she needed somebody, but they're all busy. So like trying to get somebody in, like I guess then to have those extra days to do the inspections, right? Just in case you can't find someone, so you're not like rushing at the end and not losing your client's deposit.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm laughing at Melissa, not you.
Okay. So like, you know, that investigation of property also, so basically if I were to put 3 days on that, they basically have, me and my buyers have 3 days to do any inspections before we, like if we did it on the 4th day, like we basically lost our deposit, like we can't back out anymore because it's after the days.
No, so you don't none of the contingencies get automatically removed. So even though you've hit day 4, right? If we put a 3-day investigation contingency, we hit day 4, we can still cancel because if you haven't removed that inspection or investigation of property contingency in writing. So oftentimes I'll let these, as a buyer's agent, I'll let them float out there until the close of escrow. If the other agent will let me do so, I won't remove them at all. Right. If they don't start badgering me and bugging me. And I usually, it takes more than one ask to get me to hand over a contingency removal. They've got to like, be like, hey, where's that contingency removal?
Oh, got you. Okay.
Hey,
so that contingency removal.
Like, okay.
Right. So that contingency removal is another form that you would have to fill out to say that you've, okay, got it.
Is there any disadvantage of drawing that out? Like if you're, let's say you pass the contingency deadline and you still haven't written it up. I mean, what's the worst they could do? Like send you a notice to perform?
That's the worst they could do, is send you a notice to perform and give you 48 hours to remove that contingency. No big deal. It's not going to hurt my feelings if they send me a notice to perform.
Okay, thanks.
Showing it more for your client.
Yeah, I'm going to drag, even if I've told my client like, hey, we're at day 4. It's time to remove that investigation contingency. Are you guys good? Yes. Perfect. I'm going to send it over for signatures. I'll send it over and have Mila sign it. Well, in this case, Anastasia, I'll have Anastasia sign it. And then I'll hold it. I'll sit on it. And I won't actually send it to the other agent until they start badgering me for it. And then when they start badgering me, because then my client thinks I've released that contingency, they think they're locked in. But if something were to come up and they needed to cancel, we still have the right to do so, as long as we sit on that. So until the other agent badgers me for it, I'm not actually going to hand it over.
So that's only if it was less than the 17 days, if you had lessened your contingency day, right? But other than that, 17 days is the day. 17 days is the max before you lose your deposit if you happen to back out after that.
As long as you have until you remove it in writing to get your deposit back. I could let it flow, even if I had like 17 days up there, I'm on day 27. If I haven't removed it in writing, then I can cancel that.
Okay.
It's make a difference. So say you sent it out for signatures and they put the date. So do you just not sign it until you're ready to send it? So your date will be different than the date of your...
It's only signed by the buyers. It's not signed by the agent.
Oh, okay.
So as long as it's not sent over and received by the other party, it's not removed.
Oh.
Be sitting on it over here.
Yeah.
Are there any of these contingencies that you would recommend pushing longer than 17? I know for the informational access to property, you said you like to put 25. Are there any other ones that you would push out, like maybe the loan in case it doesn't, kick in?
I usually shorten all of these up. So in this market, I shorten them all up to 14 days or less.
Oh, really? Okay.
14 days on most of our contingencies are 0. Because we're trying to be competitive with 27 other offers.
Right. And now, do you just check with your lender?
Yep, we always check with our lender on how long it's taking them to get appraisals back and how far it's going to take them to get that underwriting approval back. And it doesn't have to be full underwriting approval. We just want those contingent, whatever the conditions are going to be on their loan back, to make sure that our buyers can be able to meet those conditions. So within 2 weeks, we should be able to remove everything, and sometimes even shorter.
So you need to do that with the lender before you even submitted the offer?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's really where they stand.
Yep.
So with all your buyers, you have them come, the loan officer come with the underwritten approval.
It doesn't have to be underwritten, but they need to have reviewed the documents and everything and feel pretty good about everything. But even so, then once we get the property and contract, then they're going to submit that file to underwriting right away. It usually takes like about a week to get it through underwriting the first time, to get the conditions back of what else the buyer needs to bring to the table to get it to close. And then we'll have a pretty good idea of yes, we're good to go, or no, we're not.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. The rest of these: review of seller's documents, preliminary title report, common interest disclosures, review of leased or liened items. I usually make those match our investigation of property. I usually just have them all match outside of this one that's not a contingency, the informational access to the property. Okay, if you're going to remove any of these up front, you click this little box here to attach the contingency removal, and that lets them know that, hey, we can remove, right? Those inspections are on file. We can go ahead and remove that inspection contingency if you guys are comfortable with it. Yes, we are perfect. We're going to remove that. And just remember that we can't cancel based on the condition of the property then. We'll lose our deposit. Are you guys okay with that? Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Right? But it does make your offer more competitive. All right.